All right, so we are glad to have joining us today for 2 tips, a tie, a tune, and information about our chapter, Matt Wysocki. Matt is the Workday Volunteer Coordinator for our stream restoration and maintenance projects, which basically means Matt does a ton of work behind the scenes to make sure that all these projects happen with the board and with the chapter. So Matt, thanks for being on.
It's great to be with you, Tom. Thanks for having me.
This is fun. So Matt's a board member. So we see each other. Well, we see each other on Zoom now on the board meetings. And like I mentioned, also taking care of all kinds of work on the stream project. So before we get into the fishing stuff, Matt, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the chapter.
Well, I would describe myself as a casual fisherman. I got involved because I was asked by people I respected, who said TU was a worthwhile organization, and that is true. And there's a lot of good things happening in our chapter. But what really set the hook for me, so to speak, is the conservation aspect. And well, what we're going to talk about tonight. Frankly, I enjoy the conservation work as much, if not more, than the fishing. Actually spend more time on it.
Yeah, and you sure it sure shows. I mean, just in the time that I've gotten to know you through the board, your passion for it seems to go far beyond just something that you feel like you have to do. So that's really makes for a valuable input for the chapter and for the area. So let's talk about it. Talk about the stream projects and stream habitat. What's the Clear Waters TU doing around the area, and how do the volunteers fit into that?
Well, our chapter's projects fall into 2 basic categories. We work with our partners at the DNR on habitat improvement projects that radically improve local waterways. And then the other category would be maintenance projects that keep previously improved projects and easements fishable. So some examples of projects we've done just recently as a chapter would include Elk Creek, Gilbert Creek. We've done a lot of work on Hay Creek in Chippewa County. This year, we are returning to Gilbert Creek, and probably our first workday will be on Duncan Creek. That's hopefully coming up in December. There's a couple stream crossings there that are fairly popular, but have become a little overgrown. And so, stay tuned for opportunities there. We might get over to McCann Creek, which is kind of challenging, but we'll see how it goes. And would also like to do some more work on Wilson Creek over in Dunn County. And I should note that we also partner with our neighbors to the west, the Captuish TU chapter, on streams in our area, Wilson, Gilbert. They come over to help with those. Their volunteers help us, and we try to send folks over to help on their projects as well. And this year, I just want to get in here that they are doing a huge improvement on Katy Creek, which is, I think, a pretty popular project. There's some really great improved areas. And the interesting thing about those Katy Creek projects is the brook trout population is kind of legendary in that waterway, because it is the true native Wisconsin brook trout, and they do really well there. And so there's I want to say it's close to a half mile or maybe more of new easement where that needs a lot of work yet, but they've already had 6 work days, and it's really nice for us to send over some of our volunteers to work on Captuish as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even just taking a step back, the idea of these stream projects, some of these fishable areas don't just happen. They happen because of the work that's gone on in recent years and years past to make sure that stays somewhat fishable, right?
Boy, you got it. And it's not, all just done with taxpayer dollars. It's also a volunteer power. So, these places that we all take for granted, with the the nice wooden sign and paid for with trout stamp funds and all that. There was a lot of work put in behind that sign, and a lot of those areas they need some TLC, especially in our area. There are some projects from long ago that really do need to be improved, and that I'll tell you, that does not happen by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point where you talk about the stream restoration projects and then the maintenance too. And that part, sometimes I know for me, as I got more involved with the chapter, the whole stream projects was just fascinating to learn about, but also that idea of maintenance, that once it happens, there still has to be some ongoing work that happens intermittently. And that sometimes I think can be easily forgotten.
Oh yeah, yeah. It requires a balance. It's there's often funding available for the new projects, involving the heavy equipment and the big work, and thank goodness for that. But then, on the backside, you have to go back there from time to time and clean out that brush, or it will eventually revert to what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, for those that aren't as aware, when you talk about things like easements, can you talk a little bit about how that works with partnerships with landowners and how that works from a relationship standpoint and so on?
Well, the easement provides the DNR and our chapter basically a by right access to get in and maintain. So it's not just angler access, but there's usually a right to maintain that easement, and that roughly translates into brushing work. Now that said, we never just stomp onto a landowner's property and start doing maintenance work. There's a process of selecting that. We work with our local fish biologists, and they send a notice out to landowners saying, hey, got a group coming out on such and such a date. Here's what they're going to do. Just be ready for it. If you have any concerns about this, let me know. And so it is also a partnership with the landowner.
Sure. Sure. So how do the volunteers fit in this particular way? Either chapter members, community members, how does that work?
Lots of different ways, and different things bring people to our projects. Oftentimes, it's people who really see the value in maintaining the places where they like to fish. In fact, sometimes we field requests. Hey, are you going to go and clean the brush out of this one particular stretch that I really like to fish? Other times, they're doing it out of a sense of duty or service. I like to think, in fact, I do think that for many people, it's just plain fun. It's a community effort. There's camaraderie. Most of our work days are in the dead of winter, so people have cabin fever, looking for some opportunity to get out and get some exercise, and they get it on our projects, especially if there's deep snow. We also have benefited from some of our local universities, UW Stout and UW Eau Claire, from service learning requirements that students have, or they may, there's a instructor at UW Stout, Keith Gilland, who assigns these types of projects to his students, because how can you beat that kind of hands-on education?
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So in terms of these stream habitat things, so it's not just all about the fishing then, or is it about, how do we make this stream so that I can catch more fish in it, or if I can catch bigger fish? Does it go beyond that?
Well, that's certainly part of it. Some of these creeks are so choked with brush that casting is virtually impossible. I mean, you might be able to dab in them, but and then the other issue with some of these waterways is that the banks are so high and they're so silted over that there's nothing you would want to get into. in some of them, in some cases, they hardly hold any fish. They're just severely degraded. So obviously you can't catch fish if there's no fish there to catch. All of these projects do have the potential to hold fish. There are cold water resources. At one time, they were great for fish. But then, so getting beyond the fishing question, it is also about species preservation. Many of our projects are intended to favor cold water habitat for brook trout. Not all of our projects, but many of them. For example, the Hay Creek project, Hay Creek in Chippewa County is considered a refuge for trout, specifically brook trout, when Duncan Creek gets too warm. And so we have improved that in a way that makes it a better place for them to spawn, to live, and to reside all year long, regardless of what's going on. And I would add that, from that aspect, this is really important from a climate change standpoint as well. We're preserving cold water.
Yeah.
The projects also greatly reduce stream bank erosion, or in the case of a new project, the DNR completely pulls back the banks and grades them very smoothly. They call it connecting with the floodplain, so that when a big gully washer comes through, or we have these, 100-year floods that happen every couple of years now, it doesn't just further wash it out. The water rises gradually up the banks, and so it gets into the floodplain. A big part of this is invasives removal, and not necessarily, invasives, Eurasian or Asian, from other continents, but we have some natives that tend to take over. So a lot of the trees that we're removing are box elders, and sometimes I hear this, why are we cutting all these trees down? Well, here's the basic progression with a box elder. Box elder sprouts on the stream bank. It grows into a big tree in a pretty short amount of time, sets off a bunch of seeds and creates a bunch of more box elders. And then after that, the roots start to get washed out. Maybe a wind comes along and blows it over. The bank falls in, tree falls into the water, basically pulls the whole bank with it, and the whole process sort of starts again. And that's what you see on so many streams, are these areas that are just degraded with really high banks, silted over, sort of shallow, and eventually there's just not a lot going on in those. I see we're also creating places that people want to go, and not just to fish. If you've gone to some of these projects, and I'm going to call out a couple here, Hay Creek, definitely at 93rd, and Wilson Creek at O by 12, but just outside of Knapp, is just beautiful. We didn't take out all the trees. Wilson, in that case, that was a jungle. That was a partnership with Kiaptuish. Just a box elder jungle, acres of it, and all those box elders were removed, and then some elms and willows and a few oaks and maples were left, and it has this savanna feel. When the DNR goes in and seeds it, then they mix in some native seed mix, and so eventually we hope to see some native prairie plants like certain milkweeds and native grasses. If you've been by there, you know what I'm talking about. These are just beautiful places compared to what they were. Yeah.
I was just going to say, just to add on to that, the idea too of that, this isn't just go in and cut everything down. The strategy that goes into it, and the planning on your part and your collaboration with the DNR and with fisheries biologists, that this isn't just we're going to knock everything down. There's so much strategy that goes into it on all of your parts.
Oh, yes. This is a scientific endeavor, particularly the new projects. There is a lot that goes into them. Although I will say sometimes we are just taking everything down, but what we're taking out are, the box elders, buckthorn, overgrown cottonwoods that are, these multi-headed beasts. We will take out alders from along stream banks as well. Basically, if it's growing into the stream and creating an issue that's pulling on the banks and making casting difficult, we are going to take it out. But if we do see some, and there's always a few nicer trees in the mix, we save them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Might even trim them up a little bit, and so they grow a little nicer.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do these work days look like? What's a typical day like for you and for the volunteers that are there?
I think the first thing people think of is the chainsaw work. And this is, I think, thought of as the glamorous part of this. And it is fun. Now, in order to operate a chainsaw on state of Wisconsin DNR easements, you do have to go through a training program, a chainsaw safety training program. And we have a handful of, about a half dozen volunteers who have done that. So without a few people to operate the chainsaws, you're sort of limited on what you can do. But more important, so you have to have a few, but more important than the chainsawers are people to drag and stack brush. Ideally, you have a ratio of 4 draggers to 1 chainsaw, because one person with a chainsaw is creating a lot of stuff, a lot of debris, and that all needs to be stacked up. It gets piled up, and there's a method to all this too. You don't just pile it up; you burn it as you're piling it. As anyone who's maybe worked on their own property knows, it is impossible to burn a big stack of green branches. It's going to take at least a year for that to dry out. So there are people who sort of specialize in building these fires. You build this sort of log cabin in the middle, and then of dead wood only, and then you gradually build onto it. Leaf blowers come in handy, so usually there's someone operating a leaf blower from time to time to sort of stoke this thing up. But we practice the judicious use of herbicides, mostly just applying some Garlon formulation. It's a stump killer to the stumps that we cut, particularly for invasives, but really just about anything we cut down is probably going to resprout. And if you don't treat it, it's going to come back and be much harder to deal with. That one stump is going to become this cluster that is really hard to get at with a chainsaw. And then some of these things, like the highly invasive buckthorn, you have to deal with. So we usually assign one person, and it takes effort to make sure you're hitting everything. You got to stay on top of it. So we usually assign someone to that. So that's sort of the brushing days. But that's not all we do. Usually in the summer, we'll go back to a new project, and the DNR relies on us to operate a mulching machine. So we're feeding straw bales and shooting this. It's just a really fun job. So we try to share it, but you're shooting the straw all over, and I think you're going to show some pictures later that show what this is like. And there's different odds and ends jobs. What we were going to do this year before the pandemic hit was we were going to partner with elementary school up in, I believe it was up in Chippewa County, to replant the area that was hit with that retro by Elk Creek, by Elk Mound.
Elkin, right by 29, right? Is that where Elkin?
Yeah, right. Right there. You can't really see it from the highway, but if you drive back there, there's a popular fishing spot on the south side of 29 that is just devastated. So that was going to get logged, and then we go in and plant some more trees.
So you don't, though, for the volunteers, they don't have to be really trained in anything other than looking to contribute. So if you have the certification, you can do chainsawing, but people can show up and you direct them where to go, what to do, and it doesn't take you don't have to be an ecologist or a wildlife manager to do these things.
No, absolutely not. There's a job for everyone, and every skill level and every ability. The one other certification that you do require, we do always have to have at least 2 people on a work site who are first aid certified. so they could administer CPR if necessary, and then we keep a little first aid kit, logger first aid kit, and we always have 2 people available who could administer first aid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the pandemic. How has COVID impacted all of the stream projects and things like that?
Well, less than you would think. It has impacted it, and for quite a while this year, when it was first hitting, everything got shut down. Gradually, we figured it out. The DNR figured out some procedures that would allow us to continue this work on a slightly limited basis. So things like not having food at events. We used to have, some hot dogs, or our president Jim Erickson would make this, gourmet spread for lunch and feed all the volunteers. Well, that's sort of been nixed for good reason, because everybody's in close proximity. You would think if you're outside doing all this work, well, what could be safer than that? But it is amazing how often you come together, like grabbing the same branch, or both throwing something onto the fire, or sharing tools, or just being in the same proximity. It's also really a pain to wear masks outside, especially when you're really into it and working hard. So there was a limit of 10 volunteers placed on each workday, which frankly is fine with me. If the guy who's running around and coordinating all these volunteers, it's actually kind of hard to manage more than that.
So that's not a bad number and will masks be required then, Matt? Or
masks are not required as long as the social distancing is observed. And I think thankfully by now people are pretty much appreciative of how to do that. At first, I think we would easily forget it. I don't see it too much anymore.
Yeah. So just like the work days in general, there's still more thought and more strategy and planning that you've done and with the DNR about accounting for COVID and making that happen safely.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So let's talk about the fun part of it. What's the rewarding parts of doing these projects?
Well, for me, this is what keeps me interested in coming back, and that's true for a lot of our volunteers too. The community and camaraderie that we're building around this are just such an important part. You get out, you get some exercise, and after really just a few hours of some good work, you look back at what you've accomplished, and it's, you started out by walking into this narrow cave of brush, and you look back and it's like a completely different stream. And so that reward and fulfillment continues when you go back and fish that stream later, and sort of reap the rewards again and again. We make friends. It's a community of people who keep coming out and doing this. I would say COVID has put a little bit of a damper on that, because we don't get the big group shots at the end, the hot dogs and all that. But it's just fun to get out there with a bunch of other fairly like-minded people and work together as a team on something that is really important from an environmental and also a recreational standpoint.
Yeah. Well, let's show a couple pictures. I'm going to share my screen here, and we've got a few pictures that you have taken and shared. So I'm going to bring those up here, and this might be one that maybe you get a couple generations sometimes at the work days, huh?
We do. It requires a little extra oversight, because there's a lot of ways for kids to get in trouble. But as long as the parents, and in this case, this is one of our own chapter members. This is Keenan, and I'm drawing a blank on his son's name. Came out and they had a great time. And we see this sometimes. Kids get out and they start helping, and I just think it's a great way to involve the younger generation.
That is a great way. And we go from the young, well, there's still some younger, but now we do get a couple generations here, and young and maybe a little bit more advanced in age, right?
Yeah, this was our first big work day on the big Hay Creek Improvement project a couple years ago. We had great turnout for that. It was was a cold day, but it was really beautiful weather, and that was a really good day. We sort of figured out a lot of things on that day. That was those are good memories.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to manage, right? And this is an impressive picture. We had this as one of our cover shots for a while.
Yeah, I take credit for this one. Dave Carlson came out, and who knew? But the guy took this with his mobile phone, but he just took this beautiful picture of Hay Creek. It was the same morning as that last picture, and I just threw this in here because it's a great picture.
A great picture, and there's the teamwork you mentioned, right?
Yeah, so here's an example of what we can't do anymore.
Yeah.
We're getting a little close and snorting and sniffling on each other here, but yeah, this was it's Josh Smeltzer and Frank Lowry and myself. This was a big final push that we did on this one peninsula on Hay Creek that Tom, I think you were a part of this too. We just killed it that day, and well, it's fun to go back to that peninsula and knowing what it was, and seeing what it is now is a huge difference.
Yeah, that's one of those things that, when people go to it after it's all been done, and you probably look at it and think, oh man, you should have seen what it looked like.
So here it is. That peninsula might actually be in this picture, but that's Hay Creek, and this is what I'm talking about. When we're done with these areas, they look like a park.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, quite a change. Oh, and this is the hay bales, right?
Yep, here we are shooting the hay bales. I believe that's Mike Shanley there to the right.
Yep.
Longtime few member, very recently deceased. God rest his soul.
Mm-hmm.
He would come out for just about all these work days.
Mm-hmm.
That's that machine, that shoots out the straw.
Yeah. And so what is this to get this machine? Is that through the DNR or through private?
Nope, the DNR, and then they buy the straw from a local farmer. It comes in this huge truck. I think over 100 bales is required for some of these places. This is a big job, but it's pretty rewarding, and it's sort of the last step in the improvement project.
Icing on the cake, right? Is that Tim Meyer, I think, shooting the hay there?
Tim Meyer, yeah. There's a group working on another section of Hay Creek. This is known as the Barking Dog section between C and F. And this group did so much work last winter, and it looks great now.
That's a great shot of. That's a lot of hard work there.
Yeah, there's a group of dedicated volunteers. Behind them, by the way, is one of those cottonwoods that is like this multi-headed hydra.
Oh.
They lean over, and they always lean over the river, the creek, it seems, and they can be really challenging to deal with, but really rewarding when you get done with it.
That's great. That's a great picture.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's the burn pile, and then we got even a leaf blower going there too.
Yeah, now this is an example. That's Phil Porter there on the left, and a friend of his, I'm trying to blank on his name. These two gentlemen and myself stayed until almost 4 o'clock one afternoon because we made one of those big piles and it never burned well. And so there's Phil camped out with the leaf blower, and he did that for 2 hours, just blowing on that thing, and finally it burned down.
So there's never or rarely ever hauling wood away from this site. You try to keep it all contained and get rid of it via burning, or?
Well, sometimes the bigger logs will cut into 4-foot or 8-foot sections, and if there's someone from the community that wants it, they can come and get it. But most of the stuff gets burned up, and it has to. If we don't, and a big flood comes along, all that stuff is going to end up in a culvert or a bridge or somewhere downstream, and can create major problems.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, cool picture here. So you Get your waders on, right?
Frank Lowry and Joe Knight again, and yeah, sometimes you there's just no other way to do it. You got to get in, and the coolest thing is when somebody is like he's about to do, he's cutting that wood underwater, and there's rooster tails shooting out the back of his chainsaw. Then you know you're really into it.
Jeez, that's great. Great picture. And this, I think this might be our last one. Another one. This is a post end of the day work day here.
Yep. Yeah, that's people with the hot dogs. I think that was on Elk Creek. At any rate, people are so tired by that point, and it's just it's sort of glad to be done, but you're also really feeling good about what you did. And used to be, anyways, we might go out and meet at a local tavern. And
Oh, sure. So, I guess, yeah, that takes us back to our beginning. Yeah, those are great pictures. So before we get to your 2 tips and a tie, so if people are interested, want to do this, like you mentioned, we got one starting to come up, and if people are watching this after it's happened, what's the best way for them to get involved?
Well, you can probably the easiest way, and what we like to have you do is to go to the WCWTU website, and there's a tab for workday signups, and fill out a little form there, and that sends an email to me, and then I'm going to add you to a list. I also send out emails, so if you're receiving chapter emails, you're going to hear about workdays. You're also going to get the workday wrap up after the workday. But if you want to get in, so one thing we're going to have to manage this year is we have a maximum of 10 volunteers. So,
Right.
Captuish has been managing this really well. Randy Arnold sends out an email saying, okay, I need 9 people. First come, get on the list. And if you sign up, you got to show up because we're counting on you, because we cut it off at 9. So he's been able to manage that pretty well, and we'll have to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So we'll be sure, and also too, if for some reason you can't find the website or things, right, message anybody on the board or put something up on social media. We'll make sure that one of us or Matt gets to you, because there'll be work days coming up. And
Yeah.
what do you think in an average year? And usually winter tends to be more of these projects, correct?
There's a lot of reasons why we do it in winter. For one thing, it's just easier to get people because they're not on vacations and looking for a reason to get out. But you can burn, and there's no issue there. And it's just more comfortable to work when it's not so hot, because you start shedding clothes pretty quickly, even on a really cold day, especially if you're working around fires. And most importantly is there's no leaves or vegetation. It's all, just sticks and stumps that you're dealing with, which greatly simplifies things.
Yeah, it's a great way to contribute. Great way to contribute to the environment, to the fisheries, certainly, but beyond that, it's the water and climate and so on. So really great opportunities, and right in our proverbial backyards.
We aim for a half dozen work days a year. I think last year we would have surpassed that, and try to spread it out. And we spent a lot of time in Hay Creek the last couple of years because that was a big focus of DNR and our chapter. But people like to fish in different areas, and our chapter covers a big area, so we move it around a little bit.
Yeah, great. Well, certainly you've really helped to tune up how those work days work and organized and all that. So greatly appreciative to that. So we should though, before we wrap this up, we got to get your 2 tips and a tie and a tune. So we can't let you off the hook without a couple of those. So you've given a bunch of tips on work days and things, but we're going to ask you for 2 more. So if you had to throw out 2 tips, what would you send our way?
Well, heaven knows why anyone would listen to tips I have about fishing. I guess one would be look before you leap, and so you don't lose your waders. Keep it simple. I keep it really simple. I don't carry a whole bunch of flies with me. I pretty well. First of all, don't really get that scientific about what I'm using. I'm really not much for matching the hatch. So pretty much just take out what I'm going to need. And
Smart. That's a good, that keeps things, you're not constantly thinking about which of 24 patterns should I pick from.
yeah, and probably the biggest advantage, and I'm not telling anyone anything any seasoned fly fisher doesn't know, but the more flies you have in your box, the more flies you're going to lose when you forget to zip up your fly bag.
That's true. That's true.
Down the stream, yeah.
Small losses. Yeah, right. So, and the look before you leap, have you learned that the hard way, or?
I did. That was on Bohemian Valley Creek. I did eventually get that boot out, but it was after a great deal of effort. I was actually kind of lucky to get myself out. I had to, yeah, I think you've probably been in that situation.
Yeah, and yeah, like you say, until you're in it, does make you a little bit concerned once it happens.
Yeah, it's like quicksand.
Yeah, right. Okay, so what about a tie? What's something that you have on your mind for a tie?
Well, I really keep it simple. I like a lot of the local popular patterns. I've gotten a little more into nymph fishing, but I think what I keep going back to is just the good old parachute Adams. Usually that's what I start with.
And do you tend to go real small, real big? Just varies?
I stayed in the 14 to 18 range, and woolly buggers.
Yep. Nice. So how about your tune? What's a tune that you'd recommend or have on your mind?
I've really been into Cheap Trick lately. I never thought much of them as a band, because I think they were so popular when I was a kid. But as I go back and listen to their early recordings, boy, there's a lot there. So Cheap Trick.
Cheap Trick. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and they've been around. They were around for a little while, right? When they were at their early on to prime, it wasn't just a one-hit wonder.
Their dues like no other band in history. Yeah.
That's great. So look before you leap, keep it simple, parachute Adams while you're listening to Cheap Trick.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's great. Well, again, on behalf of the chapter and the counties and beyond, thanks for all your work with the work days. You clearly have, and none of us know all the work that goes behind it, but boy, it's given me a bigger insight into how big a job that is. And thanks for doing all that.
Well, it is really my pleasure. And for our viewers out there, it would be your pleasure too. It really is. It doesn't feel like an obligation or a duty at all. It is something I look forward to all year long.
It's great. Well, thanks for being on, Matt. We certainly appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. So long.